Trials are one of the best systems in Arc Raiders, but also one of the most confusing. Here's the good, the bad, and the stuff nobody wants to talk about. Let's get into it. First, let's go over what trials are. Trials are the optional ranking system and weekly reward track for players looking for extra challenge. You earn points by completing 5 separate categories, each scored by your best single round of the week. Rewards are given at 2,000, 3,000, and 4,000 points in each category, which makes trials one of the best blueprint sources in the game. I personally have gotten, I'd say, probably about 30% of my blueprints from trial rewards, so I would definitely make sure you at least get 4,000 points in each category. Something you should take into account when doing trials is that your points double during major map variants like Night Raids, Electromagnetic Storm, Hidden Bunker, and Locked Door, or whatever the name is once it returns on Blue Gate. All 5 of your best scores combine into your total, and that total determines your rank placement. Trials are valuable because they add a consistent weekly grind that gives you access to nice rewards, and specifically blueprints and late game materials. It encourages players to spend endgame currency and prevents economic inflation, which is great. I myself have spent several $100,000 on trials every week. Especially last week, I spent probably close to $1 million on trials alone. The trial system creates a place for competitive raiders inside of a mostly casual game, which is really nice. It gives players something to grind season after season without impacting the extraction-based balance and without adding anything that affects PvP. This provides a knowledge-based competitive mode rather than a PvP-based one, which I think is really important for a game like this because it doesn't affect the importance of PvP since none of the trials are based on PvP, which I think is fantastic. My experience so far with the current standings is I've managed to stay in top 5 every week since launch. I've received double promotions every week, and I'm currently standing at wildcard 3 at the time of recording. I've spent probably at minimum of 100,000, but last week spent upwards of 500, probably closer to 1 million credits just to maintain my leaderboard placement, which demonstrates that trials are a true endgame mechanic to help deflate loot inflation, which I think is a really good thing. Now I'd like to go over some of the things that I think are, half-baked, half steps, so to speak. I think it was a really good thing to add to the game, and I don't want to poo-poo it at all, so to speak, but I do think that it could use some minor adjustments and some improvements as we go into season 2 a couple weeks from now. And so I think it'd be interesting to hear everybody's take. I've got some interesting ideas. I'd love to hear other people's opinions on all of these. None of these are set in stone. These are obviously just some thoughts that I have, and I didn't want to come with complaints without opinions and thoughts about them. So here we go. One of the current strengths of the system that I really like is that it rewards players for understanding mechanics of the game, such as routing, map knowledge, and arc spawns. Creates a meaningful competitive loop which is separate from PvP, which I think is really important, and it serves as a placeholder for a future ranked mode or something like that if that were ever to be a thing, and I think that it's good that they added something as a placeholder, even if this is just that, a placeholder. It's a fun way to test our personal skill ceiling and compare ourselves to other high-level raiders, which I think is really fun. I would like to now go into some of the things that I think are issues with the system that could use some tweaking, and some of the thoughts that I have that I'm going to bring to the table. I would also just want to preface this and say that I would love to hear other people's opinions on what you think could help the system, or things you've thought about that might add to it, or things that you're having issues with yourself. So if you have ideas, put them in the comments down below. Currently, the randomized 100-player leaderboard seems a little bit weird to me. The game seemingly places you on a random leaderboard of 100 players as soon as you get a score in any of the categories each week. And there's no guarantee that the other players on your board are necessarily seeing the same board as you. I know some people are, but I don't know if the entire group of 100 people are all seeing the same leaderboard. This randomness leads to wildly different difficulty brackets week to week. A good example of this is last week I placed 5th with 153,000 points, while my buddy placed 11th with 160,000 points, which is a little bit weird. This creates an unfair comparison between players in the same rank, which I think is a little bit strange, and encourages players to avoid playing on Mondays to avoid dodging sweaty leaderboards, which is something that I've been doing, and seemingly it's been working since I've ended up on slightly easier leaderboards the last 2 weeks that I've just not played on Sunday or Monday very much, and weirdly enough it works. This creates a weird meta where it kind of punishes you for playing the game earlier in the week, which is a little bit strange, and I think that that could use some adjustment. Some suggestions that I have for this, and again, these are just suggestions, and I'd love to hear you guys' opinions down in the comments. Instead of a random group of 100, why don't we have all of the players from each rank on the same leaderboard, and instead of the top 20 or the top 10 from that group of 100, just make it the top 10 or the top 20% of each rank gets double promotion, right? Same percentage, same numbers, but it's all on one leaderboard, so it makes it even. This prevents imbalance and mismatched brackets, makes performance the determining factor, not luck or timing. But I do also understand that larger leaderboards are harder to run, even if they are more fair. So I understand there's probably some issues there. If anybody understands game design better than me, feel free to chime in about why that's more difficult. I'd love to understand more about that. Yeah. On to the next bit. The midweek balance changes has caused some issues when it comes to leaderboard equality. The trials week reset does not match the day that we get our weekly patches, and that has led to some issues in balancing. For instance, the Hullcracker nerf happened halfway through a week where we were required to do damage to flying arc and leapers, which was an unfair advantage for the people that did it earlier in the week. And then, for instance, I think it was the week before or 2 weeks before, there was damage done to bastions and people were using the hidden bunker map variant to go after bastions, but halfway through the week they changed the spawn mechanics and the spawn timing for those bastions, which again gave an advantage to the people that were doing it earlier in the week. So it'd be really nice to see them match the patches with the reset for the trials in the week to make sure that everybody's on the same even playing field for the week while trials are available. I think that one's a pretty simple one. If anybody else has any other thoughts, feel free to put it down below. One of the other things to talk about on this subject is late spawn problems. Obviously, we all have our own qualms with it. I'd like to preface by the fact that I understand why late spawns are a requirement. It'd be nice for them to add some sort of loot respawn mechanic, so if you spawn late, you don't get punished as badly for late spawn and get forced to go PvP. But when it comes to trials, it's really unfortunate to spawn in to a match at the 18-minute mark 3 to 5 times before getting your actual full 29-minute match, when you're risking a 100k kit on a night raid that you can't get out on a hatch key with. It's just, you know, it's risky, and I've lost a lot of expensive kits getting put into an 18-minute raid, and then there's somebody with a stitcher who spawns right behind me on a free kit within like 100 meters, and I die within 30 to 60 seconds because I'm, you know, trying to decide what I'm going to do since I spawned late, right? And obviously I'll take accountability. Some of that's me just being a dumb player, but like still, it'd be nice if they were to adjust some sort of mechanic. And one of the thoughts that I had is it'd be potentially interesting if there was some sort of mechanic where the value of your kit decided what priority you got based on time put into a raid. So the more expensive kit, the fresher into the raid you got priority to be put. Obviously that's going to cause some other issues, but I think it'd be interesting if, you know, if you're going in on a free kit, you basically get a guaranteed late spawn, and if you go in with a $100,000 kit, you get on almost guaranteed fresh spawn. I think that'd be kind of interesting. I'd love to hear people's opinions down below. This also does tie into the general spawn logic issue. I'm sure plenty of you guys are aware of the issues with spawn logic of players spawning basically on top of each other, spawning at the same spawn location, spawning within, you know, 100 meters or so of each other. It's especially bad on Stella Montis, but that's not a map that gets used very much for trials, so that's not as much of an issue in that regard. But still, it'd be nice if some of the spawn logic issues got dealt with sooner than later. And this is not me trying to hate here or anything, but Embark did have a pretty hard time working on spawn logic on the finals, and so it's just something that I hope that, since they have a lot more funding for this game than they had for the finals, that I hope that some of that funding that they're getting from the massive amount of game sales goes towards fixing spawn logic, and also the shotgun glitch, which both of those things are things that are present in the finals. So it'd be really nice to see them fix those things a little bit faster than they fix them in the finals. So yeah. One of the other issues that I'd like to bring up is the solo versus duo / trio inequity. If you're a casual solo player, you can obviously easily reach about 4,000 points in each category without too much trouble, so obviously you can get your weekly rewards. But if you're trying to be a competitive player and you also are solo, whether or not that's by choice or just because you don't have people to play with, whether or not that's due to timing issues or just whatever it is, I think there is an inequity between the ability to actually competitively compete on those leaderboards as a solo player. A lot of these categories are just significantly easier to pump out massive numbers on if you're running a duo or a trio. And so I think it'd be interesting for them to add some sort of system where it allows solos to keep up to some degree. And so currently you get punished as a solo player for not playing duos and trios, And I think it'd be interesting potentially for two reasons if they were to make the trials a specific solo based thing where the scores are not shared. So it's not your team's damage to whatever the arc is, it's just your individual damage. And I think this would be interesting because it would specifically show the skill you have as a raider, not the skill you have as a team. But then also on top of that, I think it would also obviously cause the inverse issue of what's currently going on. So instead of solos being at a disadvantage, it would put teams at a disadvantage because you'd be forced to play solo. So obviously that doesn't really necessarily solve the issue. It just makes it more specific to individual raiders' skill, and then also then would punish people who want to play in teams. So obviously that's not really a fix, but I want people's thoughts on this and what people think about that one down below, because again, if you're playing solo, you can get your weekly rewards, but you can't really grind out the ranked system unless you're playing in a team. And I think it'd be interesting for them to add whether or not it is a solo leaderboard or some sort of system where it allows solos to compete better. I don't know exactly what that would look like. I'd love to hear some thoughts down below. Anyways, closing thoughts. I really do think the trials are a fantastic system with a ton of potential, and I really like what they gave us for this first season. I think it was important for them to add some sort of placeholder for some sort of ranked system so us sweatier players didn't get bored, and I do really love what we got given. I do think it does need some work though. It gives the game an end game even past the project and adds another competitive loop on top of PvP and a meaningful weekly progression system that keeps you playing every week. The foundation is strong, but fairness and consistency need work. The leaderboard structure, patch timing, solo accessibility, spawn logic all need attention. If improved, trials could easily become one of the strongest features of Arc Raiders, and I really encourage viewers to drop their thoughts in the comments down below. Please share your own thoughts on the leaderboard experience, things that you've had issues with, things you think that could fix it. Let me know what you got. Appreciate you all, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks.